night my sister was supposed to be celebrated, my husband set down his fork and said, quietly, that something didn't add up. He didn't say it loudly. He didn't make a scene. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. His voice the same steady tone he uses when he's working through something he can't quite explain yet. And I felt the air shift. My sister had flown in from Vancouver, or so we were told. She'd been living there for the past 7 years, working as a financial analyst at a firm she'd described to us in careful, consistent detail, the name of the company, the neighborhood she lived in, the view from her apartment window. She had told us all of it, and we had believed her, because why wouldn't we? She was the one who had always known what she wanted. She was the one who had mapped out her future before the rest of us had figured out our present. That weekend, my parents had organized a small dinner at their house in Guelph to celebrate her promotion. Senior analyst, my mother had made her lemon cake, the one she only ever made for birthdays and things that felt like birthdays. My father had ironed his shirt. These were not small gestures in our family. These were the kinds of things that meant, we are proud of you, we want you to know that. I had driven up from Kitchener with my husband the afternoon before, and we spent the evening helping my mother arrange things in the kitchen, setting the table, finding the good candle holders. My sister arrived the following morning, pulling a small suitcase behind her, her hair shorter than the last time I'd seen her. She looked tired. I noticed it and thought nothing of it. Long flight, I told myself. She'd flown a lot. My husband noticed it too. But he noticed something else. He works in insurance fraud investigation. Has for almost 9 years. He has a particular kind of patience, the kind that doesn't hurry, that sits with details until they arrange themselves into something. He doesn't volunteer his suspicions, he waits. But that evening, at dinner, somewhere between my father's toast and my mother bringing out the cake, he leaned toward me and said it. Quietly. Carefully. I don't think she works at that company. I looked at him. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching my sister laugh at something our father had said, her hand around her wine glass, her smile arriving just slightly after it should have. What do you mean? I whispered. The company she mentioned last Christmas, he said. I looked it up when she described that office renovation. The address she gave doesn't match their registered location, and the title she used in November, it's not a title they use. I checked their org structure. I stared at him. You checked? Not on purpose, he said. It came up in a file last spring. I recognized the name and looked. I didn't say anything else. My mother was cutting the cake. My sister was smiling. My father was refilling glasses. And I was sitting there holding a piece of information I had no idea what to do with. I want to say I put it aside for the rest of the evening. I mostly did. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh. I helped clear the plates. I hugged my sister goodnight and told her I'd see her in the morning. But lying in the dark afterward, my husband already asleep beside me, I could not stop turning it over. She had always been the one with the plan. That's the thing about growing up with someone who seems certain. You start to organize your understanding of them around that certainty. My sister was 2 years older than me. She had known she wanted to work in finance since she was 16, had taken every relevant course, had done the internship, had moved to Vancouver at 24 with what seemed like complete confidence in exactly what came next. While I was still figuring things out, changing jobs, moving cities, taking longer than I'd expected to find something that felt like mine, she had always seemed to be exactly where she said she was. And now my husband was telling me she might not be. I didn't sleep much. By morning, I had decided I wasn't going to ask. It wasn't my information to have. Whatever was happening in her life was hers, and if she hadn't told us, she had her reasons. I made that decision clearly in the early morning quiet of my parents' guest room, and I held it for approximately 4 hours. We were sitting on the back porch with coffee when it happened. My parents were inside. My husband had taken the dog for a walk. It was just my sister and me and the yard and the maple tree our father had planted the year she was born. She looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with travel. I watched her for a moment and then I said, without fully meaning to, "Are you okay?" She looked at me. Something moved behind her eyes. I'm fine, she said. You seem tired. It's been a long few months. I waited. That's something I learned from my husband, actually. The power of not filling silence. She held her coffee with both hands and looked out at the yard. I'm not at that company anymore, she said, finally. I kept my face still. I haven't been for a while. Okay, I said. She turned to look at me, and I could see she was trying to read my reaction. How long have you known? I didn't, I said. Not really. My husband noticed something didn't match up. He mentioned it last night. She closed her eyes. She breathed out slowly. How long? I asked. Not accusatory, just a question. 3 years, she said. 3 years, she said. 3 years. I let that land. 3 years of dinners, of phone calls, of my mother asking how the job was going and my sister answering her? 3 years of Christmas updates and LinkedIn congratulations from relatives who didn't know anything had changed. What happened? I asked. She set her mug down on the armrest. She didn't look at me when she answered. She had been laid off. Not fired. A restructuring. The kind that took out a full tier of analysts when the firm shifted direction. She had been 31, had been there 4 years, had believed she was building something solid. And then she wasn't. She had spent the first month applying everywhere, the second month getting interviews that led nowhere. By the third month, she had begun to understand that the market in Vancouver was difficult in ways that had nothing to do with her competence, and that rebuilding was going to take longer than she had wanted to admit to anyone. And by then, something had calcified. She hadn't told us when it happened. She hadn't wanted to worry our parents. Our father had mentioned offhand years earlier that he didn't know how he'd feel if one of us lost a good job, and she had filed that away like a small warning. She hadn't wanted to become, as she put it, the daughter who needed help. So, she had maintained the story, said she was busy when calls came, carefully managed what she shared. She had found contract work, bookkeeping, some remote accounting support, nothing glamorous, and she had paid her rent. She had survived, but she had done it in silence. I kept thinking I was about to turn a corner, she said, and then I'd turn it, and there'd be another corner. And by the time a year had passed, I didn't know how to go back and explain. I didn't say anything. I know how it sounds, she said. It sounds like you were scared, I said. She looked at me. You were scared, and you didn't know how to say so, and then it became too big to say. That's not a character flaw. That's what happens when you wait too long. She was quiet for a moment. You're not angry, she said. I'm not angry, I told her. And I wasn't. I was something more complicated than angry. I was sad, in the way you feel sad when you realize someone you love has been carrying something heavy in a room right next to yours and you never heard the weight of it. I asked her what she needed. She said she didn't know yet. I asked her if she'd been okay. Not financially, emotionally. She said most days yes, some days not really. I asked if she had anyone out there. She said she had a few good friends who knew parts of it, not all of it. You could have told us, I said. I know, she said. I know that now. We sat there for a while without talking. A squirrel moved through the maple tree. A car pulled slowly down the street. Eventually, she picked up her coffee again, and I watched her, and I thought about all the ways we protect the people we love by keeping things from them and how that protection costs more than we account for. When my husband came back with the dog, he took one look at us and seemed to understand that something had shifted. He didn't ask. He sat down in the other chair and poured himself a coffee from the thermos and joined the quiet, like he'd always been part of it. That afternoon, my sister asked if she could talk to our parents. We all sat in the living room, my mother on the couch beside my sister, my father in his chair. My husband and I close by because my sister had asked us to stay. She told them the way she had told me, carefully, starting from the beginning. The layoff, the silence, the years of managing it alone. My father's face went through several things I can't fully describe. My mother reached over and took my sister's hand before she'd even finished. When she was done, there was a long silence. My father said, "Why didn't you call us?" My sister said, "I didn't want to be a burden." My father looked at her in a way I don't think I'll forget. He said in the quiet, measured voice he uses for things that matter, "You're not a burden. You're our daughter. That's not the same thing." My mother started crying. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way she cries when she's relieved rather than sad. My sister cried too. I sat there and held it together, mostly, though I won't pretend I was entirely successful. What came next wasn't a solution. My parents couldn't undo 3 years. They couldn't retroactively be there for a daughter who had carefully arranged her distance. But they could be there now, and they were. My father asked practical questions, not to investigate, but because that's how he shows he's engaged. My mother asked none, just held her hand. My husband stepped outside at some point and gave us the room. Over the next few weeks, things shifted in small ways. My sister started telling us more. Not everything at once. That's not how it works, but gradually. She'd text my mother about the contract she picked up. She'd call my father on Sunday evenings the way she used to. She came back to Guelph in the fall for Thanksgiving, and this time, when my mother asked how things were going, she answered honestly. She's still rebuilding. That's the part no story tells you cleanly. That after the revelation, after the tears and the forgiveness and the family sitting together in the living room, there's still the actual work. She's still finding her way back to the field she trained for. She has a part-time role now that uses her skills. And she's in the middle of a certification that might open doors. It's slower than she wanted. But she's not doing it alone anymore. I think about my husband sometimes, and the particular kind of attention he brought to a detail most people would have scrolled past. He's not someone who looks for trouble, but he sees clearly and he doesn't pretend otherwise. And on an ordinary Friday evening in my parents' dining room, that clarity changed something. He never brought it up to my sister himself, never mentioned what he'd noticed. He let me carry it and he trusted me to carry it carefully. That's a kind of partnership I didn't fully understand until I had to use it. There's a version of that weekend where I don't say anything, where I take what my husband told me and fold it away and let my sister keep her story intact. She might have maintained it for another year, maybe 2. I don't know what would have eventually cracked it open, but I know that when things stay sealed too long, they don't always open gently. I'm glad she got to choose how it came out. I'm glad it was the back porch, and our father's maple tree, and a cup of coffee, and not something harder. I still have the photo my mother took that weekend, before any of it happened. The 4 of us at the dinner table, glasses raised, my sister laughing. She looks tired in it, if you know what to look for, but she also looks like herself, like someone who is still in there, underneath whatever she'd been carrying. She texted me last week. Nothing significant, just a link to an article she thought I'd like, and a voice memo of her dog doing something ridiculous in the backyard. I listened to it 3 times. That's the thing about honesty. When it finally arrives, it doesn't always arrive with a speech or a resolution or a clear sense of what comes next. Sometimes it arrives as a text message on a Tuesday and a voice memo and the ordinary warmth of someone who is no longer at a distance. That's enough. That's more than enough. I keep coming back to that back porch. The coffee going cold. The maple tree. My sister's hands wrapped around her mug like she was trying to hold herself together from the outside in. What strikes me most, looking back, isn't the secret itself. It's the weight of it. 3 years is a long time to carry something alone, to wake up every morning and choose again not to say it out loud. I think about what that costs a person, not just emotionally, but in the small daily erosions, the careful word choices on phone calls, the rehearsed answers, the exhaustion of maintaining a version of yourself that no longer exists. My sister is one of the most capable people I know. That's not something I say lightly. She is sharp and thorough, and she does not give up easily. But somewhere along the way, she confused protecting us with protecting herself, and she paid for that confusion for 3 years in silence. What changed things wasn't the exposure. It was the honesty, and the courage it took to offer it once I'd opened the door. I've thought about this a lot. She could have deflected. She could have explained it away, bought herself more time. Instead, she sat with me on that porch and told me the truth. And I think that took more out of her than the 3 years of hiding had. Because hiding, once you're practiced at it, becomes its own kind of routine. But honesty breaks the routine. Honesty costs something in the moment, even when it saves you in the long run. And my husband, his part in this matters to me in ways I'm still working out. He didn't go looking for trouble. He noticed a detail, held it carefully, and trusted me to know what to do with it. That's a particular kind of integrity, not the loud kind, not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that stays honest, even when it would be easier to look away. He saw something that didn't add up, and he didn't pretend he hadn't. That's rarer than it sounds. What I saw in my father that afternoon in the living room, the way he looked at my sister when she said she hadn't wanted to be a burden, that stayed with me too. He didn't perform forgiveness. He just offered it, plainly, because to him there was nothing complicated about it. She was his daughter. That was the whole of it. I think that kind of steadiness, the willingness to hold someone accountable and love them at the same time, without collapsing one into the other, is something most of us are still learning. My sister is still rebuilding. That part is real and slow and unglamorous. But she's doing it honestly now, which means she's doing it with people beside her instead of alone. And I think that changes not just the outcome, but the person. There's something that firms up in you when you stop managing your image and start managing your actual life. She's quieter than she used to be, more careful with words, more willing to say, "I don't know yet," instead of reaching for the confident answer. I don't think secrets are always a moral failure. Sometimes they're just the shape that fear takes when it's been given too long to grow. But I do think that when we keep the hard things from the people who love us, even with the best intentions, we deny them the chance to be what we need them to be. My parents couldn't help my sister through 3 years of difficulty, but they could have if she'd let them. That's the part that took me a while to sit with. That voice memo she sent last week, her dog being ridiculous in the backyard, nothing significant, meant more to me than I expected. Because it wasn't about anything. It was just her, present, unmanaged, reaching across the distance without a script. That's what honesty gives back, eventually. Not a resolution. Not a clean ending. Just the ordinary warmth of someone who is no longer at a distance.